Roman soldiers didn't just fight to win, they fought to overwhelm, to break their enemies before the battle was even over. Their weapons weren't just sharp, they were designed to tear through flesh, crush bone, and leave nothing standing. Each tool they carried had a purpose, and every strike was meant to send a message. These weren't random choices. From short swords that worked best up close to massive war machines that could bring down walls, everything was built for control. The way they fought showed how far they'd go to keep power. Their tactics were simple: strike fast, strike hard, and leave no chance for recovery. Some of these weapons were so effective, they're still studied today. And one of them, the most surprising of all, was feared even before it was used. Here's what they carried into war. First, Gladius. The Gladius was the core of Roman close combat fighting. It was about 20 inches long, double-edged, and built for stabbing. Roman soldiers used it in tight formations, especially during their famous testudo formation, where they stood shoulder to shoulder behind locked shields. The short size made it ideal for thrusting in confined spaces. Soldiers trained to go for the stomach or chest, where the armor was weakest. Stabbing, rather than slashing, was more effective and quicker. This allowed Roman soldiers to keep moving forward without losing control of their formation. The Gladius wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool of Roman military strategy. With every step forward, Roman lines pressed closer, and the Gladius helped carve a path through enemy ranks. The weapon's design even included a sturdy hilt and a widened base, which gave soldiers a firm grip during combat. Over time, different versions emerged. The Mainz and Pompey types were the most well-known. The Mainz had a wasp-waisted blade, which helped make withdrawal from wounds easier. The Pompey type was straighter and more practical, optimized for mass production and uniformity. The Gladius was more than efficient. Roman legions advanced with it, step by step, cutting down resistance through collective force rather than individual skill. It demanded training and control, but in return, it delivered reliable results. Used correctly, it could decide the outcome of a battle within minutes. Once enemies fell or staggered back, the Gladius cleared the path forward. Second, Pylum. The Pylum was a heavy javelin carried by Roman infantry. Around 6 feet long, it had a wooden shaft and an iron shank with a pyramidal tip. It was designed to be thrown before close combat began. Soldiers carried 2 of them. The iron tip was soft enough to bend on impact, making shields it struck useless. If the enemy tried to remove it, they often had to abandon the shield completely. That left them exposed and easier to finish off. The Pylum wasn't made to be reused. Its design made sure enemies couldn't throw it back. It disrupted enemy formations at the exact moment before contact. This gave Roman troops a serious advantage as they moved in with their shields and swords. Over time, the design evolved to improve penetration and the speed at which it bent. Some had barbed tips, while others had thinner shafts to ensure a better curve on impact. The Pylum was reliable. It didn't just wound, it caused panic. When a shield line failed, the soldiers behind it became vulnerable. The Pylum helped break that line fast. It wasn't glamorous or complex. It was a simple, brutal opener to the Roman assault. Combined with the push of infantry, it laid the groundwork for victory. The timing of its use was everything. Thrown just before charging, it cleared the way for the next weapon. Third, Fustibbalis, staff sling. The Fustibbalis was a basic staff sling used by Roman slingers and auxiliaries. It was a wooden stick with a sling attached to the end. Soldiers used it to launch lead bullets or smooth stones at high speeds. These projectiles were shaped for better accuracy and range. Some were even marked with symbols or messages meant to intimidate the enemy. The bullets were small, dense, and fast. Unlike arrows, they didn't make a sound in flight. Enemies often didn't hear or see them coming until they were already hit. A well-aimed shot could break bones or knock a soldier off his feet. Slingers stayed behind the main lines and used the Fustibbalis to rain down damage before the main clash. It was a support weapon that weakened the enemy, caused injuries, and forced confusion in their ranks. The staff gave extra range and leverage, allowing more powerful throws. It didn't need expensive parts. All it took was a skilled arm and the right type of projectile. In many cases, soldiers used stones found near the battlefield. But for organized campaigns, they carried molded lead bullets. These were more effective and could pierce light armor or crush bones. Slingers didn't fight up close. They softened up the enemy from a distance. The silence of the projectile made it more dangerous. It was hard to dodge what you couldn't hear. The Fustibbalis was easy to carry, easy to hide, and deadly in the right hands. Fourth, Hasta. The Hasta was a long spear used primarily for thrusting. It was around 6 to 7 feet long, with a straight wooden shaft and an iron tip. Early Roman soldiers, especially the Hastati, carried it as their main weapon. Unlike the Pylum, the Hasta wasn't thrown. It was held steady and aimed at the enemy as soldiers advanced. Its job was to keep opponents at bay, pierce through armor, and maintain formation control. Soldiers used it in a wall-like formation, stepping forward in unison. Each thrust was supported by the weight and pressure of the unit. The Hasta worked well against infantry and cavalry alike. In defense, it stopped charges. In offense, it let soldiers push the enemy back, one step at a time. It didn't require heavy swinging or wide movement. A quick jab was enough. The point could be leaf-shaped or narrow, depending on its purpose. It aimed for weak spots, gaps in armor, exposed arms or legs. A line of hastae could control a large area, forcing enemies to keep their distance. The weapon taught coordination. Every movement was timed with the group. It wasn't flashy. It was controlled, repetitive, and effective. Even after the Gladius became more dominant, the Hasta remained in use with certain ranks and ceremonial units. Its reliability and reach made it a long-standing part of Roman infantry combat. 5. Puio Dagger. The Puio was the Roman soldier's backup weapon. Small, usually between 8 to 11 inches long, it was a flat, wide-bladed dagger worn on the belt. Its purpose was survival. When a soldier lost his primary weapon or found himself in a tight space, the Puio became essential. It was fast to draw and easy to control. Soldiers trained to use it for stabbing between armor plates or under the ribs. In tight quarters, it was more useful than a sword. The dagger was used in ambushes, last stands, and silent kills. It also had political weight. The dagger that killed Julius Caesar was likely a Puio. Soldiers often customized the blade, with decorations or personal touches, but its function stayed the same. A sharp point, a solid grip, and a blade that could end a fight quickly. In chaotic battle moments, it gave a Roman soldier one last chance to survive. It wasn't carried to show status. It was carried because any fight could turn into a struggle for life. The Puio was lightweight, easy to maintain, and always within reach. That made it one of the most dependable tools in a Roman soldier's gear. 6. Mace. The Roman mace was a weapon built for impact. It didn't need a sharp edge. It worked through sheer force. The head was often made of metal or heavy wood, attached to a short handle. Soldiers used it to crush armor, break bones, and knock enemies off balance. In close combat, the mace was easy to swing and hard to block. It didn't require precision. A single hit could disable an opponent. Roman soldiers used it when swords and spears weren't practical, especially in confined areas or when fighting heavily armored enemies. It was effective against helmets and shields, delivering shock through layers of protection. The weight did the work. A quick swing could dent metal and drop a man to the ground. The mace didn't need special training. Strength and timing were enough. It was a reliable choice for guards, cavalry, and foot soldiers alike. Its simple design meant fewer parts to fail in battle. Over time, variations developed, but the core idea stayed the same. It was a weapon of direct violence. When the fighting got messy and close, the mace was the tool that ended it fast. Watching someone collapse after their armor buckled sent a clear message to anyone nearby. Some maces had knobs or flanges to focus the force and hit even harder. When used, it wasn't to wound, it was to end fights fast. 7. Scourge. The Scourge was a multi-thonged whip, often tipped with bone, metal or hooks, turning each lash into a weapon that tore flesh. While it was mostly used for punishment and control, it also had a presence in war zones. Roman soldiers used it for interrogations, public punishment, and occasionally even psychological warfare before or after battles. Unlike traditional whips, the scourge wasn't about delivering pain alone. It was designed to maim and leave lasting wounds. The tips could tear deep into the skin, causing blood loss, shock, and terror. Legionaries understood the power of fear, and the scourge worked as a symbol of Roman authority. Rebellious locals and prisoners often experienced its full wrath. Sometimes it wasn't even about punishment, but a method of warning others, brutality in plain sight. The Roman military believed discipline started with control, and the scourge helped maintain that in a way words never could. 8. Falx. The falx wasn't originally Roman, but once Roman soldiers faced it, they couldn't ignore it. This curved blade, used by Dacian warriors, was sharp on the inner edge and capable of slicing through armor and helmets. After taking heavy losses in Dacia, the Romans adjusted their own armor to defend against the falx, even reinforcing helmets with extra bars. That alone speaks to the fear this weapon inspired. Roman blacksmiths eventually forged their own versions, adapting it for specific skirmishes. In combat, the falx could hook over shields and armor, dragging enemies down or slicing into exposed flesh. Roman tactics relied heavily on formation and shield use, but the falx disrupted all of that. It was long enough to reach past the front line and curved enough to strike from unexpected angles. The weapon's design made it unpredictable, and its power left permanent marks on how the Romans fought and protected themselves. 9. War animals and fire. Rome used more than metal. They weaponized fear through fire and animals. Dogs trained for war charged into enemy lines, biting and dragging down fighters. They didn't need commands once unleashed. They targeted limbs, throats, anything they could reach. Soldiers weren't ready for teeth in the middle of combat. Then there were pigs. Sometimes lit on fire, sometimes left alone. Their screams alone terrified enemy elephants. In battle, elephants panicked and trampled their own lines. Rome saw it happen and used it again. Fire was chaos. Oil pots, flaming logs, tarred spears. Siege fights turned into infernos. Soldiers feared fire more than blades. Lions, bears, leopards weren't battlefield tools, but they were part of the Roman system. In arenas, they punished prisoners. They sent a message. Rome controlled even nature. The flames, the fangs, the panic, they weren't for glory. They were for results. 10th. Ballista. The ballista was Rome's precision machine. It looked like a giant crossbow and worked like one too. Coiled ropes and heavy arms stored force that launched bolts the size of spears. It was used in sieges, behind lines, from walls and ships. One shot could pierce a shield, then the man behind it, and the one behind him. These bolts moved fast, too fast to dodge. They didn't just injure, they impaled. Soldiers fell without warning. Morale broke when men died before battle even started. The sound of it, the tension and snap, froze soldiers in place. Roman crews reloaded quickly. They fired again and again. The enemy never got used to it. Smaller versions called scorpions were mobile, faster, deadly in closer fights. Rome used them across the empire. When resistance was strong, ballistae did the softening. They weren't flashy. They were effective. They tore holes in defense lines and mines. Rome fought with engineering, and the ballista was proof. Bonus weapon, plumbata. Among the Roman army's brutal arsenal, one weapon often slips under the radar. Small, quiet, and terrifyingly effective, the plumbata didn't roar like a catapult or slice like a gladius, but it rained death before enemies ever reached the front line. It was like a flying nail wrapped in iron and tipped with pain, and Roman soldiers carried dozens of them, ready to launch with a flick of the wrist. The plumbata was a short throwing dart with a barbed iron tip and a lead weight wrapped around the shaft. That weight gave it momentum. When thrown, it arced through the sky and dropped hard. It could pierce armor. It could break formation. It didn't need to be accurate. It only needed to fall from the sky and create chaos. By the time enemy troops closed the gap, their shield walls were scattered and their steps uncertain. This wasn't just a tool for skirmishers. Even frontline infantry were trained to throw these darts before the charge. They could carry them tucked inside the hollow of their shields. With each soldier armed with 5 or 6 plumbatae, the Romans created a sudden cloud of sharp projectiles, weakening the enemy before the swords even came out. Emperor Constantine was one of the first to officially incorporate the plumbata into legionary training. He understood its potential in disrupting barbarian formations, especially against fast-moving enemies like the Goths. It wasn't just about killing, it was about control. You didn't need every dart to hit its mark. You only needed a few to drive fear into the enemy line and slow them down. Roman manuals even show that troops practiced throwing them overhand and underhand, both for distance and surprise. Unlike javelins, they could be thrown in tight spaces. They filled the gap between archers and hand-to-hand fighters, and they cost almost nothing to produce. When used in waves, especially alongside peeler and archers, the plumbata created a staggered zone of pain that few armies could cross untouched. It didn't leave behind glorious wounds or cinematic scenes. What it left were collapsed shields, punctured lungs, and commanders wondering what hit them before the fight began. For a weapon barely larger than a forearm, the plumbata proved that even the quietest tools in Rome's arsenal could end a war before the clash of swords ever began. Rome didn't just conquer the world through politics or strategy, it did it with steel, discipline, and weapons designed to leave nothing standing. From the gut-ripping Gladius to the chaos-launching plumbata, every tool had a purpose. Not just to kill, but to send a message. A message that resistance was pointless, that standing in their way only meant a slower end. These weren't just weapons, they were symbols of control. Each one sharpened by years of battle, each one made more deadly by the minds that wielded them. The legion wasn't just a fighting force, it was a machine. And every gear, every piece, worked together to break armies and erase cities. But what made them terrifying wasn't just the tech, it was the mindset. Roman soldiers trained not just to fight, but to dominate. Every cut, every strike, every dart thrown, it all came from that same core belief. Rome moves forward, and nothing survives in its path. So, the next time you hear about ancient battles or see a dusty sword in a museum, remember what it meant in the hands of a Roman soldier. It wasn't just for show, it was built to end things. If you found these weapons fascinating, hit that like button so more people get to see just how far Rome went to secure its grip on the world. Drop a comment with the weapon you found most brutal or the one you'd never want to face in a dark alley. And if you're into this kind of historical breakdown, you know what to do, subscribe. There's a lot more coming. Rome may have fallen, but its weapons and their legacy still echo through time.